Commander Lucas Grant walked into the Galactic Assembly Hall with his back straight and his eyes forward. The hall was massive and beautiful in ways that human architecture could never match. Walls of living crystal rose toward a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. Light from distant stars filtered through transparent panels and painted everything in shades of blue and gold. Representatives from 12 different species sat in their designated sections, and all of them watched the human delegation enter with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to open disdain. Lucas had prepared for this moment for 3 months. He had gathered intelligence reports and analyzed communication, intercepts, and compiled enough evidence to convince any reasonable being that danger was approaching. But as he looked around the chamber and saw the ancient faces of creatures who had ruled the stars for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire, he felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. These beings did not see him as an equal. They saw him as a child playing at adult games. Lieutenant Nina Castellanos walked 2 steps behind him. She was his attach and his friend, and the only person in the room he trusted completely. She carried a data tablet containing all their evidence, and her face showed nothing of the nervousness Lucas knew she felt. "Hi, Counselor," Narration called the assembly to order. She was ancient even by the standards of her species, and her blue skin rippled with patterns of bioluminescence that indicated her mood to those who knew how to read them. Right now, those patterns suggested polite disinterest. "The human delegation has requested time to address the council on a matter of security," Narration announced. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the entire chamber without effort. "Commander Grant, you may speak." Lucas stepped forward to the central platform. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. Some of those eyes were compound, and some were thermal sensors, and some were things he could not even identify. But all of them shared one quality. They did not take him seriously. "Honored members of the council," Lucas began, "I come before you today with information that threatens the peace and stability of this entire sector. The Verax Collective is preparing for war." A ripple of reaction passed through the chamber. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others made sounds that might have been laughter in their native languages. Ambassador Thelveris, a tall insectoid being whose emerald shell gleamed under the starlight, clicked his mandibles loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The Verax signed the Concordat of Silence 40 cycles ago," Thelveris said without waiting for permission to speak. "They are bound by the same laws that govern all civilized species in this region of space." "With respect, Ambassador, signatures on documents do not prevent aggression," Lucas replied. He gestured to Nina, and she transmitted the data to every delegate's personal display. "Over the past 18 months, our intelligence network has detected significant changes in Verax military activity. They have increased weapons production by 300%. They have recalled all diplomatic personnel from border systems. They have conducted training exercises that specifically simulate attacks on civilian population centers." "And how exactly did humans obtain this intelligence?" another delegate asked. This was Counselor Vaelthus, a being whose species communicated primarily through color changes in their skin. Right now, his skin was a skeptical shade of orange. "Your species has been part of the galactic community for barely 40 standard cycles. You do not have the infrastructure for this kind of surveillance." "We have eyes and ears and we use them," Lucas said simply. "Humans have always been good at watching and learning. We noticed patterns that perhaps more established species overlooked because they were not looking for them." Thelveris rose from his seat. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his presence commanded attention in a way that Lucas could not match through physical stature alone. "Commander Grant," Thelveris said, with a tone that an adult might use when speaking to a confused child. "I understand that your species is new to interstellar civilization. You come from a world with a violent history, and you see threats where none exist. This is natural. But you must understand that the Galactic Council has maintained peace in this sector for over 6,000 years. We have developed systems and protocols and relationships that have prevented exactly the kind of conflict you describe. Those systems work only when all parties respect them," Lucas said. He kept his voice calm, even though frustration burned in his chest. "The Verax do not respect your systems. They see them as weaknesses to be exploited. And you know this how? Narration asked. Her bioluminescent patterns had shifted to something that might have indicated genuine curiosity. Have you spoken with Varrock's leadership? We have intercepted their communications. We have analyzed their fleet movements. We have studied their history. Lucas paused and looked around the chamber. Every expansion the Varrocs have ever undertaken began with exactly this pattern of behavior. Military buildup followed by diplomatic withdrawal followed by sudden, overwhelming attack. They did it to the Kelvari. They did it to the Sunth. They did it to a dozen species whose names are now forgotten because no one survived to remember them. Those conflicts occurred before the Concordat, Thelvarus countered. Before the Varrocs joined civilized society, a predator does not become peaceful simply because it signs a piece of paper. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted objections in a dozen different languages. Translators struggled to keep up with the chaos. Narration raised her hand, and slowly the noise subsided. Commander Grant, she said carefully. What exactly are you asking the Council to do? I am asking for a defensive mobilization of the combined fleet. I am asking for increased patrols along the Meridian cluster border. I am asking for evacuation protocols to be established for civilian populations in potential target zones. Lucas paused. I am asking you to prepare for the possibility that I am right. Thelvarus made a sound that was definitely laughter. You want us to mobilize the largest military force in the sector based on the suspicions of a species that is not even mastered. Faster than light travel without assistance. Commander, do you have any idea what such a mobilization would cost? The diplomatic implications alone would set back relations with the Varrocs by decades. Better, strained relations than billions of dead civilians. Exaggerate, I hope I do.
Lucas
met the ambassador's compound eyes without flinching. I hope that 6 months from now, you can stand before this council and tell everyone that the paranoid humans were wrong. I hope you can mock me for wasting your time. But if I am right and you do nothing, the blood of innocent beings will be on the hands of everyone in this chamber. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Delegates exchanged glances. Narration's patterns flickered through colors that Lucas could not interpret. Finally, the High Counselor spoke. The Council will take the human concerns under advisement. A committee will be formed to review the submitted evidence and make recommendations. Until that review is complete, no military action will be authorized. Lucas knew what that meant. Committees moved slowly. Reviews took months. By the time they finished advising, it would be too late. How long will this review take? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. These matters cannot be rushed. Perhaps 8 to 10 standard months. The Varrocs will attack within 6. That is your opinion, Commander. It is not shared by this council. Lucas looked around the chamber one last time. He saw dismissal on every face. He saw ancient beings who had grown so comfortable in their peace that they could not imagine it ending. He saw pride and arrogance and the absolute certainty that they knew better than the young species. Standing before them, and I have nothing more to say. He turned and walked toward the exit. With Nina falling into step beside him, Thelvarus called after him. Commander Grant, try not to worry so much. The galaxy is more civilized than your primitive homeworld. You will learn this in time. Lucas did not turn around. He did not respond. He simply walked out of the chamber and into the corridor beyond, where the filtered starlight seemed somehow colder than before. That went about as well as expected. Nina said quietly, "They will not listen." No. Lucas stopped walking and stared out at the stars beyond the transparent walls. Somewhere out there, the Varrocs were preparing for slaughter, and the beings who could stop them had just chosen to do nothing. Then we prepare on our own, he said, and when the attack comes, we answer it. She did not ask how 7 human ships would stand against an armada. She did not ask what their chances were. She simply stood beside her commander and watched the stars and waited for the storm that both of them knew was coming. 6 months passed, and the galaxy continued to spin in peaceful ignorance. The committee formed by the Galactic Council met twice and produced a preliminary report that recommended further study. Diplomatic channels remained open with the Varrocs Collective. Trade ships moved freely across borders. Life went on as it always had, for thousands of years. Then the sky above, Meridian Prime, turned red. The attack came at dawn on the colony's capital city. 40 million people were waking up to begin their ordinary days when the first Virax warships tore through the upper atmosphere. They came in waves of black metal and burning engines. They came without warning or declaration or any of the civilized protocols that the Galactic Council believed would prevent such things. They came to kill. Orbital bombardment struck the government district first. Buildings that had stood for centuries vanished in columns of fire. Emergency services tried to respond, but there was nothing to respond to. Where the administrative center had been, there was now only a crater filled with molten glass and ashdot. The Virax did not stop there. They spread across the planet like a plague. Landing craft dropped soldiers into every major population center. These were not occupation forces. They were extermination squads. They moved through streets and homes and shelters with methodical precision. They killed everything that moved. A young girl named Sophie ran through the burning streets of her neighborhood with her mother's hand gripping hers so tightly it hurt. She did not understand what was happening. She only knew that the monsters had come, and everyone was screaming, and her father was not with them anymore. Her mother pulled her into a collapsed building, and they hid in the darkness while heavy footsteps passed outside. Sophie wanted to cry, but her mother covered her mouth and whispered that she must be silent. She must be so very silent. 3 systems away, Admiral Patricia Vance stood on the bridge of the human carrier, resolute, and watched the distress signals multiply on her tactical display. Each blinking light represented thousands of voices crying out for help. Each fading signal represented thousands more who would never cry out again. "Casualty estimates?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands had curled into fists at her sides. Ensign Derek Cole looked up from his station. His face was pale, and his eyes were wet. 2 million confirmed dead in the first hour, Admiral. The number is climbing faster than we can track. Patricia closed her eyes. She thought of Sophie and all the other children hiding in the darkness. She thought of parents who would never see their families again. She thought of Commander Lucas Grant standing before the council and begging them to listen. "Set course for Meridian Prime," she said. The bridge went quiet. Every officer turned to look at their admiral. Her executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Grace Holloway, said carefully, "The council has not authorized intervention. Our standing orders are to maintain position and await instructions. I am aware of our orders. If we engage without approval, it could be considered an act of war. The political consequences could be severe." Patricia opened her eyes and looked at Grace. They had served together for 15 years. They had faced pirates and smugglers in the cold emptiness of deep space, but they had never faced anything like this. "Grace," Patricia said quietly, "there are children dying on that planet right now. They are hiding in basements and closets and praying that someone will come to save them. The council is not coming. The combined fleet is not coming. No one is coming except us. We have 7 ships. Intelligence suggests the Virax Armada numbers over 60. I know. We cannot win a direct engagement. I know that too." Grace was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Patricia turned to address the entire bridge. "All hands, this is Admiral Vance. In approximately 4 hours, we'll arrive at Meridian Prime. We will be engaging a superior enemy force in defense of civilian populations. I will not lie to you about our odds. They are not good. But there are people down there who need us, and I will not abandon them to slaughter while we wait for permission that will never come." She paused and looked at the faces of her crew. They were afraid. She could see it in their eyes. But beneath the fear, she saw something else. She saw determination. She saw the stubborn human refusal to accept the impossible. Any crew member who wishes to be relieved of duty may do so without consequence. This is not a lawful order, and I will not force anyone to follow it. But for those who choose to stay, know that what we do today will matter. It will matter to the people we save. It will matter to the galaxy that has forgotten what courage looks like. And it will matter to every human who comes after us. No one left their station? Patricia felt something warm spread through her chest. Pride, perhaps. Or maybe just gratitude for the people who served beside her. Helm, maximum burn. Communications, signal our escort ships. Tell them we are moving to engage and they are welcome to join us. She sat down in her command chair and stared at the stars ahead. And someone get me a line to Commander Grant. He deserves to know that someone finally listened. The Resolute's engines roared to life and the ship leaped forward into the darkness. Behind her, 4 destroyers and 2 frigates fell into formation. 7 ships against an empire of death on the council station. Ambassador Thelvarus received word of the human mobilization with disbelief. He rushed to the High Counselor's chamber and found Narration already watching the reports from Meridian Prime. "This is exactly what the human warned us about," Thelvarus said. His voice was shaking. "We must respond. We must send the combined fleet immediately." Narration's bioluminescent patterns were cycling through colors of grief and shame. The authorization requires consensus from all 12 member species. 3 have already refused. They fear the Virax will target their own systems if they intervene. So we do nothing. We watch 40 million people die because of politics? What would you have me do, Ambassador? I am bound by the same laws I swore to uphold. Thelvarus stared at the images on the display. Cities burning. Bodies in the streets. Ships falling from the sky like dying birds. "The humans are going," he said quietly. "Yes, 7 ships against 60. They will be destroyed, probably. Then why are they going?" Narration was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. Because they are human. Because they would rather die fighting than live knowing they did nothing. She turned to face the ambassador. "Perhaps that is something we have forgotten. Perhaps we have been at peace so long that we no longer remember what it means to stand for something worth dying." For Thelvarus thought of Commander Grant standing alone in the assembly hall. He thought of all the dismissive words he had spoken. He thought of calling humans primitive and paranoid and young. "Maybe we were wrong about them," he said. Yes, Narration agreed. "We were wrong about many things." On Meridian Prime, Sophie was still hiding in the darkness. The footsteps had passed, but new sounds had taken their place. Explosions in the distance. The roar of engines overhead. Her mother held her close and whispered that help was coming. Someone would come. Someone always came. Sophie did not know if that was true. But somewhere in the black sky above her dying world, 7 human ships were burning toward her at maximum speed. And aboard those ships, men and women were preparing to do the impossible. Not because they thought they could win, but because some things mattered more than winning. Some things mattered more than survival. Admiral Patricia. Admiral Vance watched Meridian Prime grow larger on her view screen and made her peace with whatever came next. Behind her, the crew of the Resolute did the same. They were afraid and outnumbered and probably doomed, but they were human. And humans did not abandon the helpless. Not ever. The Virax Supreme Commander was called Warlord Kethra, and he had conquered 11 worlds before this one. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human ships approach with something close to amusement. His armada filled the space around Meridian Prime like a swarm of angry insects. 63 warships, bristling with weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. And against this force, the humans had sent 7 vessels. Now they are either very brave or very stupid, Kethra said to his adjutant. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "Perhaps both, Warlord. It does not matter. They will die like all the others. Send the forward squadron to intercept. I want those ships destroyed before they reach weapons range." 12 Virax destroyers broke formation and moved to engage the human fleet. Their commanders were confident. They had numbers and firepower and the blessing of their warlord. This would be over quickly. Admiral Patricia Vance watched the enemy ships approach on her tactical display. She had expected this response. In fact, she had counted on it. She said calmly. Lieutenant Commander Grace Holloway nodded. "Enemy destroyers will be in weapons range in 6 minutes. Good. Signal all ships to execute Pattern Sigma on my mark." Pattern Sigma was not in any tactical manual known to the Galactic Council. It was a human invention born from centuries of asymmetric warfare on their homeworld. When you could not match your enemy in strength, you changed the nature of the fight. All ships report ready. Admiral, execute. The 7 human ships fired their engines and accelerated directly toward the incoming destroyers. The Virax commanders saw this and prepared to unleash their weapons. But before they could fire, human vessels released their cargo. 1,200 drop pods erupted from the human ships like seeds scattering in the wind. Each pod was small and dark and coated in materials that absorbed sensor signals. Each pod contained a squad of 8 human soldiers in vacuum-sealed combat armor. And each pod was aimed not at open space, but at the Virax warships themselves. The pods were silent. In the void of space, there was no sound to betray their approach. They did not show up on radar or thermal imaging. They were ghosts, made of metal and determination. Sergeant Major Henry Patterson was crammed into Pod 7 with his squad. The interior was dark, except for the soft glow of helmet displays showing their approach vector. He could feel the vibration of the pod's small thrusters making constant adjustments. Through a tiny viewport, he watched a Virax cruiser grow larger and larger until it filled his entire field of vision. 30 seconds to contact, he said through the squad channel. Remember your training. Radio silence until we are inside. Hand signals only. We move fast and we move quiet. Private First Class Maria Santos checked her rifle for the 10th time. She was the youngest member of the squad, and this was her first combat drop. Her hands were steady, but her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Corporal Danny Webb sat across from her. He was a veteran of 3 tours and had the calm eyes of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He caught Maria looking at him and gave her a small nod. It was not much, but it helped. The pod struck the hull of the Virax cruiser with a dull thump that no one inside the ship would notice. Magnetic clamps engaged automatically and held them in place. A cutting laser began to slice through the outer armor. Breach in 10 seconds, Patterson announced. Weapons ready. The laser finished its work and a section of hull fell away into the pod's collection chamber. Cold air rushed in from the ship beyond. Alien air with alien smells. The smell of the enemy. Patterson was first through the hole. He dropped into a maintenance corridor and immediately swept his weapon in both directions. Clear. He signaled for the others to follow, one by one. The squad entered the Virax ship. They moved like shadows through the dim corridors. Their boots made no sound on the metal floors. Their armor was designed to absorb noise and regulate temperature so they would not appear on thermal sensors. The Virax did not know they were there. The Virax could not even imagine that anyone would be there. In their entire history of conquest, no enemy had ever boarded their ships during battle. Why would they? It was suicide. It was impossible. But humans had a long history of doing impossible things. Across the Virax armada, similar scenes were unfolding. Drop pods had attached to 14 different warships. Squads were cutting their way inside and beginning their silent infiltration. Some targeted engine rooms. Some targeted weapons control. Some targeted the bridges where commanders sat unaware that death was walking toward them. Through their own corridors, Patterson led his squad deeper into the cruiser. Their target was the main reactor. If they could disable it, the ship would lose power and become useless in the battle. Maria took point at the next junction. She peered around the corner and saw 2 Virax soldiers standing guard outside a heavy door. They were massive creatures, nearly 3 meters tall with thick armored hides and claws that could tear through steel. They held plasma rifles that could vaporize a human in a single shot. Maria held up 2 fingers and then pointed at the guards. Patterson nodded and made a series of hand signals. The squad split into 2 groups and approached from different angles. The Virax never saw them coming. The first guard fell with a neural disruptor dart in his neck. The second turned at the soft sound of his companion hitting the floor, and Maria was already there. She moved under his weapon and drove her combat knife into the gap between his armor plates. He tried to roar, but her hand was over his mouth, and then he was falling. And then he was still. The whole engagement took 4 seconds. No alarms, no alerts. Just 2 dead guards and an open path forward. Good work, Patterson whispered. Keep moving. They reached the reactor room 3 minutes later. Inside, Verax engineers worked at control panels, without any idea that their deaths were standing just outside the door. Patterson counted 6 targets and assigned each squad member their mark. On my signal, he breathed. 3, 2, 1. The door slid open, and 8 humans flowed into the room like water through a broken dam. The Verax engineers had no time to react. They had no time to reach for weapons or sound alarms. They simply died where they stood. Silently and efficiently, Danny moved to the main control panel and began the shutdown sequence. Maria and another soldier secured the doors while Patterson watched over everything with the eyes of a man who had done this many times before. Reactor offline in 2 minutes, Danny reported. Quat 2. Report the response came through his earpiece in a whisper. Bridge secured. Commander eliminated. We have control of navigation. Squad 4. Weapons array disabled. This ship is not shooting anyone else today. Patterson allowed himself a small smile. Across the Verax fleet, human soldiers were taking control of enemy vessels from the inside. Ships that had come to slaughter innocents were now turning against their own armada. On the flagship, Warlord Kethra noticed something strange on his tactical display. 3 of his cruisers had stopped responding to commands. 2 more were drifting out of formation, and the human carrier had not fired a single weapon. What is happening? He demanded. His tactical officer looked up with confusion on his alien face. I do not know, Warlord. Our ships are going dark one by one. There is no explanation, but there was an explanation. It was just one that the Virax had never considered. The humans had not come to fight a space battle. They had come to fight a different kind of war entirely. A war of shadows and silence and small teams of soldiers who moved like ghosts through enemy ships, and they were winning. Warlord Kethra stared at his tactical display and tried to understand what he was seeing. 7 of his capital ships had gone completely silent. Their systems were offline and their crews were not responding to any communication. 5 more were drifting out of formation with no explanation. And now 2 of his own cruisers had opened fire on their sister ships. Oh, this is impossible, he growled. Who is attacking us? His tactical officer was frantically working at his console. Sweat dripped down his gray skin, and his claws clicked against the controls with increasing desperation. Warlord, I cannot identify any enemy vessels within weapons range. The human fleet is holding position outside our perimeter. They have not fired a single shot. Then why are our ships destroying each other? No one on the bridge had an answer. No one could imagine an answer. The Verax had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 1,000 years. No enemy had ever gotten close enough to touch them. No enemy had ever dared, but somewhere in the corridors of the flagship, boots were moving silently toward the bridge. Human boots. Human soldiers. Coming to finish what they had started, Sergeant Major Henry Patterson led his squad through the massive warship with careful precision. They had entered through a hull breach near the engineering section and worked their way upward deck by deck. Every patrol they encountered was eliminated before they could raise an alarm. Every door they passed was sealed behind them to prevent discovery. Maria Santos walked point with her rifle raised and her senses sharp. She had killed 4 Verax soldiers since boarding, and each kill had become easier than the last. She did not know if that should worry her. Right now she only knew the mission, and the mission was all that mattered. Bridge is 2 decks up, Patterson said through the squad channel. Intelligence suggests heavy guard presence. We go in hard and fast. Eliminate all hostiles. Secure the warlord alive if possible, and if not possible, Danny Webb asked. Then we make sure he does not give any more orders. They reached the final corridor leading to the bridge. 2 massive doors stood at the end, guarded by 8 Verax elite soldiers in heavy armor. These were not regular troops. These were the warlord's personal guard, chosen for their size and ferocity and absolute loyalty. Patterson studied them through a small camera drone he had sent ahead. 8 guards. 8 targets. His squad had 8 soldiers. The math was simple, but the execution would be anything but. Everyone picks a target, he ordered. We breach on flash. No hesitation. No mercy. Maria felt her heart racing as she took her position. The guard she had been assigned was the largest of the group. A monster of muscle and armor who carried a plasma cannon that looked like it could punch through a tank. She took a breath and let it out slowly. Fear was natural. Fear was human, but fear did not control her. Breaching in 3, Patterson announced. 2, 1. Execute. A flashbang grenade sailed through the air and detonated in the middle of the guard formation. The blast of light and sound disoriented the Varrox for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds was all the humans needed. Maria burst from cover and sprinted toward her target. The big guard was shaking his head and trying to raise his weapon. She was faster. She slid under his arm and drove her knife into the joint where his leg met his hip. He roared in pain and swung at her, but she was already moving. A second strike to his throat silenced him forever. Around her, the rest of the squad was finishing their own engagements. Danny took down 2 guards with precise shots to their eye clusters. Patterson killed the commander of the guard with a brutal combination of strikes that left the Varrox broken on the floor. In less than 10 seconds, all 8 guards were dead. "Breach the door," Patterson ordered. A shaped charge blew the bridge doors off their hinges. The squad poured through the smoke and chaos like a wave of destruction. Varrox officers scrambled for weapons. Technicians tried to flee. And in the center of it all stood Warlord Kethra, finally understanding what had invaded his ship. "Humans!" he snarled. "You dare to board my vessel?" Patterson leveled his weapon at the Warlord's chest. "Your fleet is compromised. 7 of your capital ships are now under human control. Your weapons are offline. Your engines are disabled. You can surrender, or you can die. The choice is yours." Kethra was a warrior who had never known defeat. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds and built an empire on the bones of his enemies. The idea of surrender was foreign to him. Impossible. Unthinkable. He lunged at Patterson with claws extended, moving faster than anything that large should be able to move. He was a predator at the peak of his power, and he intended to tear this small human apart with his bare hands. Patterson sidestepped the attack and fired. The neural scrambler hit Kethra in the chest and sent a surge of electricity through his nervous system. The warlord's muscles seized and he crashed to the floor, conscious but unable to move. "Secure him," Patterson said calmly, "and get me a line to Admiral Vance on the bridge of the Resolute." Patricia Vance received word of the flagship's capture with a feeling of relief so intense it nearly brought tears to her eyes. She had sent her people into the belly of the beast, and they had succeeded beyond anything she had dared to hope. "Status report," she demanded. 12 enemy capital ships neutralized or captured. 8 more in full retreat. Remaining Varrox vessels are breaking formation and withdrawing from the system. Grace Holloway looked up from her console with something like wonder on her face. "Admiral, we won. We survived," Patricia corrected. "The job is not finished until those colonists are safe. Signal all captured vessels to maintain position. Deploy marine units to the surface. I want rescue operations underway within the hour." On Meridian Prime, people hiding in basements and shelters heard something they had not expected to hear. Silence. The bombardment had stopped. The Varrox patrols had vanished. And now, new ships were descending from the sky, ships with human markings and human voices broadcasting on emergency channels. "This is the Earth Defense Force. We are here to help. If you can hear this message, stay where you are. Rescue teams are on the way." Sophie heard the message through a broken speaker in the building where she had been hiding with her mother. She did not understand all the words, but she understood enough. Help had come. Someone had answered. Her mother was crying. Sophie did not know if they were happy tears or sad tears or something in between. She only knew that the monsters had stopped, and the sky was no longer red. And there were people coming to save them, Captain. Omar Hassan led the first medical team into the ruined capital city. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his life. Bodies in the streets. Buildings reduced to rubble. The smell of death hanging over everything like a fog. But there were survivors too. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. People who had hidden and prayed and refused to give up hope, even when hope seemed foolish. Omar found Sophie and her mother in a collapsed building near the city. The little girl was dirty and scared, and she flinched when he approached. But when she saw his human face and heard his human voice, she ran to him and wrapped her arms around his leg and would not let go. "It is okay," he said softly. "You are safe now. I promise." He did not know if he could keep that promise. He did not know what the future held for this broken world, or the people who lived on it. But he knew that today, at this moment, he had done something that mattered, and sometimes that was enough. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Meridian Prime. The fires had been extinguished and the dead had been buried, and the slow work of rebuilding had begun. Refugee camps stretched across the planet's surface, filled with survivors who were still trying to understand what had happened to their world. Medical teams worked day and night to treat the wounded. Engineers struggled to restore basic services to cities that had been reduced to rubble. The cost of the Verax attack was staggering. 9 million people had died before the human fleet arrived. 9 million lives erased in a matter of hours because the Galactic Council had refused to listen to a warning. The number was so large that it was difficult to comprehend. It was easier to think about the 31 million who had survived. 31 million people who were alive because 7 human ships had done what the entire galactic community would not. Commander Lucas Grant stood outside the Galactic Assembly Hall and watched the stars through the transparent walls. He had been summoned to address the council once again. This time, no one was laughing. This time, no one thought he was paranoid or primitive or young. Lieutenant Nina Castellanos appeared beside him. She looked tired. They all looked tired now. "It is time," she said. Lucas nodded and walked into the chamber. The hall was exactly as he remembered it. The living crystal walls still rose toward infinity. The light from distant stars still painted everything in shades of blue and gold. But the atmosphere was different. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that might have been shame. High Counselor Narration rose to address the assembly. Her bioluminescent patterns were muted and gray, the colors of mourning among her people. "The Council formally recognizes the human intervention at Meridian Prime," she announced. "Your actions saved an estimated 31 million lives across the colony world. On behalf of all member species, we offer our deepest gratitude." Lucas stepped forward to the central platform. The eyes that watched him now held no contempt. Some held respect. Some held guilt. Many held both. 31 million saved, he said quietly. 9 million lost, including 600 of my people who gave their lives in the battle. The chamber was silent. No one dared to speak. 600 soldiers who knew they were flying into a fight they probably could not win. 600 men and women who left behind families and friends and futures. They did not die because they had to. They died because this council chose to do nothing when something could have been done. Ambassador Thalvaris rose from his seat. His emerald shell seemed duller than Lucas remembered, as if the weight of recent events had physically diminished him. "Commander Grant," he said, "I owe you a personal apology. I stood in this very chamber and called your species primitive. I dismissed your warnings as the fears of a young civilization that did not understand how the galaxy worked." He paused, and his compound eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. "I was wrong. I was arrogant and foolish, and my arrogance cost millions of lives. I do not know if you can forgive me, but I need you to know that I am sorry." Lucas looked at the ambassador for a long moment. Part of him wanted to accept the apology and move forward. Another part wanted to remind Thalvaris of every dismissive word he had spoken. But anger would not bring back the dead. Anger would not rebuild Meridian Prime. Anger would not prevent the next attack. "I do not blame you personally, Ambassador," Lucas said finally. "You believed what you had been taught to believe. You trusted a system that had worked for thousands of years. The failure was not yours alone. It belonged to everyone in this chamber who chose comfort over vigilance. What would you have us do now?" Narration asked. Her voice was heavy with exhaustion and regret. "Learn from this. Adapt. The Verax are not defeated. They are regrouping and planning their next move. and they are not the only threat in this galaxy. There are others out there who see the Council's reluctance to fight as an invitation to attack. You are asking us to abandon our principles of peaceful coexistence, another delegate said. His tone was not hostile but worried. I am asking you to prepare for the possibility that not everyone shares those principles. Lucas activated. Holographic display showing the Meridian system. In the surrounding space, humans learned long ago that hoping for peace does not create it. Strength creates peace. Not strength used for conquest, but strength that makes conquest impossible. The best way to avoid a war is to make your enemies understand they cannot win one. Admiral Patricia Vance appeared on a large display screen. She was attending the session remotely from the Resolute, which was still stationed in orbit around Meridian Prime. Commander Grant speaks the truth, she said. Human military doctrine is different from anything the Council has seen before. We do not rely on massive fleets or overwhelming firepower. We specialize in infiltration, precision strikes, and unconventional tactics. We turn enemy strengths into weaknesses. You boarded Virax warships during active combat, Thelvaris said, with something like wonder in his voice. No species in galactic history has ever attempted such a thing, because no species thought it was possible. Humans do not accept impossible. We find another way. Mirushin leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership, Lucas said. We are not asking to lead the galactic community. We are not asking to replace the Council or change your fundamental values. We are asking for a seat at the table. Equal partners working together to protect everyone. You want to join the Council as a full member species? Yes. And we want authority to establish a joint defense initiative. Human tactical advisors working alongside your military forces, training programs to share our methods. A rapid response fleet that can act without waiting for committee approval. The chamber erupted in murmurs as delegates discussed the proposal among themselves. Lucas waited patiently. He knew this decision would not be made quickly. Old habits and old fears did not disappear overnight, but something had changed. He could feel it in the air. The galaxy had been shaken out of its comfortable assumptions. The Virex had proven that peace was not guaranteed, and the humans had proven that there was another way to face the darkness. The vote took 3 hours. Species that had ignored humanity for decades now debated the merits of alliance. Old rivals set aside their differences to consider a common future. And when the final tally was announced, humanity had been granted full membership in the Galactic Council along with authority to establish the joint defense initiative they had requested. Lucas walked out of the chamber feeling lighter than he had in months. Nina fell into step beside him, and they made their way to the observation deck, where the stars spread out before them like diamonds scattered on black velvet. We actually did it, Nina said. We did something. Whether it is enough remains to be seen. Sergeant Major Henry Patterson was waiting for them near the viewport. He had been released from medical care just 2 days ago and still moved with the careful slowness of someone whose body was still healing. Word is, you changed some minds in there, he said. A few. It is a start. Think it will last? Lucas considered the question. Through the transparent walls, he could see a Virax prisoner transport being escorted to detention facilities. Beyond it, the stars stretched endlessly into the unknown. There were wonders out there that humanity had not yet discovered. There were dangers that no one could predict. The future was uncertain, and always would be. It will last if we make it last, he said finally. If we keep showing up when it matters. If we keep being the ones who step into the silence and fill it with something better. Patterson nodded slowly. Sounds like a lot of work. It is. Lucas allowed himself a small smile. Good thing we are human. We are used to that. On Meridian Prime, Sophie looked up at the night sky and watched the ships moving among the stars. She did not understand everything that had happened. She did not know about councils and treaties and politics. She only knew that monsters had come and humans had stopped them. Her mother stood beside her, holding her hand. They had lost everything in the attack. Their home. Their city. Sophie's father. But they were alive and they were together, and somewhere up there, people were making sure the monsters would never come back. Will they protect us? Sophie asked. Her mother squeezed her hand. Yes, sweetheart. They will. And far above, aboard ships that had become legends, human soldiers kept watch over a galaxy that had finally learned to listen.